Okay. He mentioned one of the meanings to be that by you putting the second bit of the fly back in, you're swallowing your pride, right? And that was a metaphoric meaning. It's not literal that you dunk it back in, but you're saying that, okay, if a fly goes in, that food is too low for me, right? You're not going to just put that bit away and carry on eating the rest. You're just going to chuck the whole food away in the bin, right? This was what the Prophet ﷺ came to eradicate. He came to eradicate israf min at-ta'am, which is wasting of food and general things like that, right? The Prophet ﷺ came to eradicate these sort of things. So this is an understanding that we get from the classical scholars, and these understandings can never be obsolete. They can never be sort of redundant and not applicable anymore. So this is really important that we go back to these understandings of the hadith. Brother had a question.
Yeah, so regarding what you said, the Prophet advised people not to do the harvest in certain way. They should do it in certain way.
Yeah.
So then they got the negative result, per se.
Yeah.
So, but what we believe is that no matter people are an hour, so that means this is not general.
Yeah.
So because the Prophet as we understood it, or myself, he doesn't say something out of his will. Just based on what Allah said.
Okay.
So if that is like wisdom,
Yeah.
inspired to him,
Okay.
he told these people and they got the opposite.
Okay, so let me see if I understood the question. Okay, let me see if I understood the question properly, and because you mentioned the verse in Arabic, I'll try and explain it as well. So the brother mentioned in Surah An-Najm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says regarding the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيُ يُوحَى, that he does not speak out of his own desire, except it is a revelation that is revealed to him. So whatever the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, it's a revelation, right? Everything he says, correct? Is that?
Which means it has to be true.
Yeah, it has to be true. But this again, it's what I tried to mention in the first week as well about literally, yeah. If we took the literal meaning of that verse, yeah, everything which the Prophet ﷺ says is wahi, and we have to act upon it. It's qat'i, and we have to act upon it. It's wujub al-amal alayh. Everything which the Prophet ﷺ says. But again, when we look at the Quran and Hadith, we look at it through a lens. And this lens that we look at is the framework that has been laid down by who? By the Sahaba, how they understood the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Because you can have different understandings to the same thing, right? We mentioned examples last time, but for example, I might mean different things with the same word that you might mean. For example, if I say site, right, to a website designer, I say, oh, have you seen the site? He's going to think I'm talking about the website. If I say it to a builder, what is he going to say? The building site, right? So just the word site, they can get two completely different meanings depending on who I'm talking to, the context, how they understood it, correct? So this is why you need a scriptural hermeneutic, they call it, a lens that you view the scripture with. So وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى, that he doesn't talk about it from his own sort of whims and his own desire, right? That actually means that as the most part, this is talking about the wahi of the Prophet ﷺ, but this is what we call khas to the Prophet ﷺ, but there are some exceptions. As in, there are some exceptions. Some things might be from the Prophet ﷺ's opinion. Let me give you a few examples. So, the Prophet ﷺ, when I forgot these, Jarir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Jarir and his wife, right? I forgot his wife's name. It's mentioned in the hadith. Jarir and his wife, something happened and they separated, and he wanted to get back with her. She did not want to get back with him, and he was crying and he was like really went really sad and went to depression mode. And he went to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he asked him, oh, can you please go and tell the Prophet to tell my wife to take me back? And Abu Bakr Siddiq was, go tell him yourself. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ, he was crying and this and that, and then he went to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, I'll go and ask her. And the Prophet ﷺ went and asked her, just take Jarir back. And she asked him, she said one thing, Al-Amir am Shafi'. Are you commanding me, or are you just interceding for him and giving him your opinion? And then he goes, Shafi'. I'm just giving my opinion. He said, فَإِذَنْ لَا أُبَالِي بِهِ. Then I don't want to take him back. So this was the opinion of the Prophet ﷺ that he gave. Other instances of the Prophet ﷺ's opinion that he sort of had his own personal preferences. This famous story of Khalid bin Walid when they were in the house of Maymuna radiallahu ta'ala, which was the Prophet ﷺ's wife, Khalid bin Walid's aunt, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, who was there also, and they were cousins. So Khalid bin Walid, they were sitting to eat, and they had this roasted lizard in front of them. It was presented to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, "No, I don't want to eat it. I'm not eating this." And then Khalid bin Walid, he really enjoyed eating that kind of food. So he said to the Prophet ﷺ, "Are you not eating it because it's haram?" The Prophet ﷺ said, "No, I'm not. It's not that. It's just this kind of food. It's not from the food of my people, and it's kind of, I have a bit of disgust for this type of food, right?" But then Khalid bin Walid started eating it in front of the Prophet ﷺ, right? So there are certain things which are from the personal preference of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the understanding we get from وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, so that's the other scenario is like command. It doesn't occur.
Where is the commanding? As-safru
So
qita'atun min
when
azab.
the Prophet was telling them, do this, you don't do that. That is like giving a command.
Yeah, okay.
That command
Yeah.
needs to be like inspired.
Okay.
This scenario is like, it's to do with the human being. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets within a human being so that they act and work like us. So that
Exactly.
everyone.
Yeah.
So we got likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
So naturally we are all different.
Yeah.
So that I can understand that from
Yeah. So the second thing is when he commands, then it's wajibul amal. Is that what you're saying? If he sort of commands, then you have to act upon it. Okay, again, some scholars did understand it like that. Some scholars like Dawood al-Zahiri, Ibn Hazm Andalusi, some scholars who are literalists, they understood if the Prophet ﷺ commanded, if'al hakadha, do this, and he forbade something, then don't do this, then it's haram. If he said forbade it, if it's wajib, if he said if'al hakadha, do it like this. Right? Is that the question? Okay, so again, we have a notion of the ijtihad of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That sometimes the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can do something out of his own sort of human nature, and this was sort of the personal characteristics. But sometimes all commands and all negations aren't for haram and halal. For example, in Sahih Muslim it's mentioned regarding, it's in Riyadh Salihin as well, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade wearing sandals when standing up. Is that haram? If you ask anyone in the world, when we wear our shoes all the time when we're standing up, is that haram? He forbade, it said in the hadith, Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from putting your thingies or sandals on when you're standing up. Of course not, right? So sometimes the negation can be, a negation is better not to. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said that because it might cause you discomfort, because when you're sitting down, it's easier for you to do it, right? Certain things the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade from certain things, but then he does it himself. For example, he forbade from urinating standing up, right? He forbade that. It said that Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam anil bawli qa'iman, salawatullahi alayhi. But then Ibn Umar narrates that the Prophet ﷺ urinated standing. So is it this conflicting from the Prophet ﷺ? He forbade it, but then he did it himself. No, it's because of the particular context and that situation. Where the Prophet ﷺ urinated standing up, it's because the area that he did it in, it was a dirty area. So if he sat down, then the splashes would have gone on him and it would have caused him najas and dirt. So this is why we understand the hadith holistically, with all the other narrations together. Because if we take one hadith in isolation, one of our ustad actually mentioned, if I, for example, just took this phone here, and then I got the phone, and then I took this a picture of Brother Hamza sitting right there nicely, right? And then I put it on social media, right? Are people going to think that we're in a class right now, we're studying hadith? Not really. But if I took the picture of all of you here, and I just took one of these panoramas, right, and I got everyone in the picture, then it looks a bit more like, I have the books here in front of me as well, then it looks more like a class, isn't it? So likewise, a single isolated hadith is a snapshot of reality. So you can have different snapshots that show you different points, but it shouldn't show you the whole picture. So the whole panoramic vision, the whole picture, is taking the hadith holistically together. And to do that, What's needed is training in the scriptural hermeneutic that I was talking about. You need to get your lens that you view scripture, you need to get it right. Some people have this framework where every authentic hadith that comes, they will act upon it. I mean, that is a framework. It works. Like you can act upon every Sahih hadith, but it's not a very good framework, because what happens if there's two or completely authentic hadith, like the hadith I mentioned about unity standing up? What if they come conflicting each other? Then what do? You're stuck, right? That's why you need this sort of a scriptural framework. So going back to did that answer your question now? Oh, shukran. Yeah.
When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet to marry the wife of his adopted son, for example.
Okay.
Zayd bin Sabit.
Yeah.
So, how can we separate that? It is not from natural desire.
Yeah.
It is inspired.
Yeah.
You see that
Because
it
Quran.
will be difficult for people now to, kind of say it's natural desire,
Yeah.
really inspired Quran.
I think what's really important to know is something which is qat'i, which means it's sort of decisive in terms of its applicability, which is Quran and Mutawatir hadith, which we were meant to actually talk about the definitions today, right? But this is really important, so I'll mention it as well. So something that has reached you and it's conclusively, it's wajib, it's imperative that you act upon it. If it's in that way, then we know definitely we have to act upon it. And this is something that is not from the hawa, it's not from the desires of the Prophet ﷺ. Rather, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how do we understand those prohibitions and commands which are for example, for preferability? For example, in the Quran, this is a really interesting one. In the Quran it says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. What does that mean, Shaykhna? Yeah, go on, tell them, Sheikh. Yeah, so like the Sheikh mentioned, he's a bit tired today, so his voice is a bit down. But whoever wants to believe, Allah says in the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, I think, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants to believe, let him believe. Is Allah commanding you? Whoever wants to disbelieve, let him disbelieve. Is Allah letting people disbelieve? So what does that mean? Do you understand? That's why you need this framework. So how the scholars understand it is because they take a holistic approach to it. They understand it in context. They understand it in terms of, was this a specific incident or was it a general incident? I'll give you another example before we actually start what we're meant to do. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who knows Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu? Everyone knows him, right? He's one of the main companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who narrated many hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. What is, the exact number? Around 5,000, isn't it? Something like that. All right, it's coming in this book anyway. I read it ahead somewhere. He is one of the companions that narrated one of the most hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. By the way, just for Shaykh Muhammad's purpose, the narrations, how did they count the narrations? 5,000, It's because what Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya did, he looked at the Musnad of Baqi ibn Makhlad, and he is the first one who numbered all the hadith. He said 5,000 were in the Musnad of Abu Hurairah. This is a side point. But Abu Hurairah was one of the first, one of the Sahaba who narrated the most hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. And once this incident is in Sunan of Abu Dawood, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, rahmatullahi alayhi, so it's a collection of hadith called Sunan Abu Dawood. So Abu Hurairah, once he was with the Prophet ﷺ, and a man comes to him and he goes, the man goes to Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ, I hugged my wife, I kissed my wife. Is my fast intact? The Prophet ﷺ said, yeah, it is intact. Right? And he went, Abu Hurairah was with the Prophet ﷺ. And then there were people with the first man as well, right? There were people with him. So obviously they're going to go back and they're going to narrate that fasting doesn't break, hugging your wife, kissing your wife doesn't break your fast. They're going to narrate that because they heard it directly from the Prophet ﷺ. A second man comes a while later. And then the second man asked the Prophet ﷺ that if I hug, exact same question, if I hug and kiss my wife, is my fast intact? The Prophet ﷺ said, no, you have to do qadha, you have to repeat that fast. Abu Hurairah was there, group of companions were there. They're going to go back and they're going to narrate the fasting breaks your, because hugging and kissing your wife breaks your fast. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu said that if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have known the reason why the Prophet ﷺ said this. The reason why the Prophet ﷺ said this is because when the first man came, the first man was an old man. So what he meant was different, but then the second man, who was a slightly younger man, so what he meant was quite different. Do you understand? So it's the context of the hadith that really has an effect on the outcomes that we reach from the fiqh and our understandings of this. Yeah? So these were the two hadiths that we wanted to clarify. Alright, okay. Alright,
So,
okay.
I mean, he said that for a reason.
Yeah.
But he doesn't actually.
No, the old man hasn't got sexual
I
desire.
understand. I get it. Yeah. What I mean is, but it does not like. Even, I mean.
Oh, you're talking about what the actual ruling is?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That you learn with Sheikh now.
Come to.
Yeah, of course, yeah. This in the Hanafi school of fiqh.
Yeah.
The Hanafi school of fiqh, it doesn't. That's just a side point.
Don't try at all.
Yeah. What's the principle? Sheikh always says it, Hamza always says it. ما لا يتم به الواجب إلا ما لا يتم به الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. Whatever is the gateway for something, right? To stop that is actually wajib also. So if something wajib to do later, it's wajib to do the prelude to that as well. So this is what the brother meant. Okay. So everyone understood those two hadith side points anyway. Okay, so last time we went through some definitions of ilm mustalah al-hadith. What is it? What's a hadith? What's a khabar? What's an athar? Right? They generally mean the same things. It's a transmission from the Prophet ﷺ, including his sayings, what he said, what he did, his actions, what he approved of, his taqrirat, and basically shama'il, which is basically his description, physical description. And by the way, if you want to study the physical descriptions of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sheikh here, Sheikh Muhammad, he delivers the shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ at Brighton University on Wednesdays. I think it's every other Wednesday. So it's really beneficial because people ask, okay, how do we study the shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ ourselves? The answer is you can study, it's very easy. But when do you get the motivation for it, right? It's when you actually come down to the masjid and everyone's doing it. And mashallah, we have a sheikh in our midst who has an unbroken chain back to the author of that book, Shama'il Tirmidhi. And that book actually covers the whole physical traits of the Prophet ﷺ, right? How he talked, how he walked, how he dealt with people, right? It's really important to know. Like when I teach the children here, they're really fascinated to understand how was every single action of the Prophet ﷺ recorded. Right, how was every single? Because we did the hadith today with the children here. Al mar'u ma'a man habba, that the person will be with whom he loves. And the question was asked that how is it that every single aspect is recorded? It's because the companions around him loved him and they were with him all the time. And when you love someone, you remember all their details, all their characteristics, and they put it to pen. And this is in reality how it happened. So Shama'il is a go-to, inshallah. Next we said the sanad. What is the sanad? It's the chain of narration from the Prophet ﷺ to the hadith narrator. So for example, if it's Sahih al-Bukhari, right, it'll go back from his teacher to his teacher to his teacher to the Prophet ﷺ. This is called as-sanad. Literally means a support. We had all the definitions in English on the screen, but obviously we have some technical issues. Next time we'll have it, inshallah. So you can see the physical representations of it. It's a lot easier to grasp. Then we have the matan. What is the matan? Matan is the text of the hadith, right? And the special science of the critique of matan is to do usually with fiqh, right? People who deal with fiqh are the people who critique the actual matan of the hadith. And then we were talking about musnad. What's a musnad hadith? It's a book of hadith that are arranged in alphabetical order by the sheikh's teachers or the sahabi. And then we talk about musnad, a person who narrates hadith to his students, a muhaddith, a hafiz. Hamza was a hafiz of hadith. There's a lot of it, but do we say a number in it? 100,000. So some scholars say 100,000 hadith. Person who knows 100,000 hadith is a hafiz of hadith. So when we say things like hafiz ibn Hajar, this is what we mean. One interesting point. Who was the last hafiz? Muhammad. Is there a hafiz in the world? That's what Abdul Habib asked last week. He's not here today. But is there any hafiz in the world today? You know who's the last Khatamul Huffaz? They say it's in India there was a person called Abdullah Darkhasti. They They say in India he was a hafiz of hadith. He literally knew 100,000 hadith. And I think the brother asked last time, is it with the chain of narration? The answer is 2. They know the chain of narration and the hadith itself. So it's a phenomenal activity that these people undergo. And they say in Syria, it's actually a teacher of one of our teachers, right? Abdullah Sirajuddin, right? I think he's a student of Sheikh Samir al-Nas, right? Sheikh Samir al-Nas is his student, of course. He was a hafiz of hadith, the seal of hadith in Damascus, right? So he knew 100,000 hadith. So it can be done today, right? No reason why not. A hakim, which is the last definition we did last time. What hakim? Hakim?
The one who gives the ruling,
Literally is that. That's why we said hakim nisapuri. The one who gives the ruling is a hakim. But hakim, when we talk about hadith, a hakim is someone. Brother, can you remember what hakim was? Trust me, you can. It's the big legend one. It's the one who knows all of the hadith. Only a few hadith have escaped them, right? Literally, a person who's encompassed all the hadith. That's a hakim of hadith. Okay. I think we'll carry on for about 15 minutes, inshallah. Yeah, 15-20 minutes. How are you feeling, Shaykh Ahmed? 15 minutes, yeah, and then we'll conclude it. Okay, so in terms of a narration, right, these are two very important things, right? One is, it would be easier if I had the representation, but I'll give you an overview next time. Al-Khabrul Mutawatir, and one is Al-Khabrul Ahad. These words are just thrown about a lot by people, and they don't really truly have a deep understanding of what it means. So in terms of how the hadith reached us, I'm not talking about authenticity. I'm just talking about, because all of these hadith can be authentic, but in terms of us acting upon it, in terms of it reaching us, there's two types of hadith. One is mutawatir, which means a mass transmission, and one is ahad, which is a solitary transmission. What do I mean by that? So the author mentions here, ينقسم الخبر بالنسبة لوصوله إلينا إلى قسمين فإن كان له طرق غير محصورة بعدد معين فهو المتواتر. So if a particular hadith doesn't have a defined quantity of narrators, meaning that there's so many narrators that you can't count them, right? Then this hadith is mutawatir. Even then, this might seem like a clear definition, but it's not a clear definition, because what do I mean by that? I mean, so again, because we don't have any visual representation, I have to use my hands. So here's the Prophet ﷺ. During the Prophet ﷺ's time, so all of you were present when I said something. Imagine I was to the seat of the Prophet. You heard this, and there was so many of you, right? So everyone hears this hadith, and then after that, they transmit it to a large group like you as well. And then they transmit it to a large group as well. So this hadith is like exponentially grows, right, in terms of its how many people it's reached. And they say a mutawatir hadith is the hadith that, even not in just hadith, in other sciences as well, like in Aqidah, the first discussion in Aqidah Nasafiyya is about mutawatir. But what does mass transmission mean? It means that this is so well known that him and him are not just going to make this up just to fool you, just to trick you. They're not going to make it up. For example, we know who's been to China here? Anyone been to China? No one? Yeah? No one's been to China. We all know China exists, right? We know China exists because the whole world isn't just going to make China up to lie to us. And yeah, China's a place, but it doesn't actually exist. It's like, these flat earth guys, right? They think the whole world just conspires just to make everyone think the earth is round, right? But obviously they're fools because the earth is round, right? But in regards to this mutawatir thing, the definition of it is that so many people narrate it that it's impossible for them to unite upon a lie. So they won't just lie just to trick you. So it's definite that the Prophet ﷺ said this. So if it's definite that the Prophet ﷺ said this, then 100% you have to act upon it. 100% you have to act upon it. Things that have reached us to tawatur. Number one, who can give me an example of one scripture that has reached us to tawatur? Quran. That's reached us to tawatur, definitely. Because the Quran is something that if you go to a different part of the world, they don't know your language, you don't know their language, they can still recite the Quran to you. It's mass transmission all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ's time. So that's got science of its own. It has parallels to the science of hadith, but likewise, some hadith are also said to have reached this stage. Also said to have reached the stage of mutawatir, right? But then, okay, then you have hadith mutawatir and you have Quran. What if a hadith mutawatir goes against the Quran? Then what do you do? Can a hadith which is mass transmitted go against the Quran? Hypothetically, this is a question that's asked commonly by the people who sort of look at Islam in a critical light. If there was a hadith mutawatir, if it says something and the Quran says something else, which one do you accept, which one do you drop? Hypothetically, yeah, neither. You try to act upon both of them, yeah? Exactly. That's the first thing that the scholars do. They do jama. Try to act on one in light of the other. But if they're conflicting completely, in theory, if they conflict, and you take the hadith mutawatir, if it came afterwards. But in practice, it never happened. It never happened that there was a hadith like this. And even some scholars argue, I mean, I've sort of skipped it, but some scholars argue that a mutawatir hadith doesn't exist. In principle, for example, in definition, it does exist, but in application, it doesn't exist. For example, people like Ibn Hibban, for example, he said there's no mutawatir hadith, right? People like who's the Maqas Sharia guy, man? Maqas Sharia. Ash-Shatibi, yeah, the Andalusian scholar Ash-Shatibi, he says that it's hypothetical. I actually have a quote from him. He said it's hypothetical that the hadith mutawatir exist, or it's nadir, it's very rare that they do, right? So he means that they won't really conflict in that sense. But again, I just went a bit sidetracked, but it's relevant to this. So tawatur literally came from the word tawatur al-matar, which means when rain sort of starts flowing, one after the other, rain starts flowing, right? So it's a perpetual sort of thing that happens. So tatabu' nuzulihi. And istilah, it means that when such a big, large group of people narrate it, that tahilul ada tawatuhum ala al-kidhb, that naturally it's impossible for them to unite upon a lie, right? So in every tabaqa, meaning in every generation of Sahaba, a large group narrated it. The generation after them, a large group narrated it. Generation after them, a large group narrated it. Just as I explained to you, all of you narrate to a large group, and then they narrate to a large group. There's exponential growth that happens there. This is khabar mutawatir. So the conditions of khabar mutawatir are, there's 4 conditions. One is that a large group of people narrate it, right? Even if in terms of words, a few people, right, disagree with the wording, right? And it said, according in Tadrib al-Rawi, which is one of the books of Usul Hadith, that the preferred opinion is that at least 10 people, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 people, right? If they narrate it, that's mutawatir. So that's one thing. أن توجد هذه الكثرة في جميع طبقات السند, that this kathra, this large group is found in every generation of companions, generation after them, and generation after them. Another condition is أن تحيل العادة تواتهم على الكذب, that naturally it's impossible for them to unite upon a lie. And then again, it makes rational sense, right? If they say, for example, سمعنا أو روينا أو لبسنا, that we heard or we saw a certain thing, right? So if they talk about things that they couldn't conceive, for example, if they talked about, it's mentioned here, huduthul alam, which means the beginning of the universe, if they start speaking about that, then obviously we wouldn't call this khabar mutawatir, because there's no way they could have known about that until they were there. Do you understand? So this is what khabar mutawatir is. What's the ruling of khabar mutawatir? Yufidul ilm al-dhururi. So it constitutes to definite knowledge, as in you have to sort of act upon it. Right? الذي يضطر الإنسان إلى التصديق به تصديقا جازما كما يشاهد الأمر بنفسه. It's as if you witnessed it yourself, right? And you wouldn't have فإنه لا يتردد في تصديقه, and you wouldn't have any doubt in its affirmation. فكذلك الخبر المتواتر لذلك كان المتواتر كله مقبولا ولا حاجة إلى البحث عن أحوال الرواة. That's why every mutawatir hadith is maqbul. So now you have 2 types of mutawatir. One is mutawatir in terms of its word. For example, the exact word, I say something, for example, actions are according to intentions. I said this. Every single one of you narrates it to your student with those very words, actions are according to intentions. That's called mutawatir lafzi. And then they, according to the exact words, narrated to their students for at least the first three tabaqas, the first three generations. That's called mutawatir in terms of its wording, lafzi, mutawatir lafzi. If I said actions are according to intentions and someone said deeds are according to intentions, someone said intentions are according to actions, I heard that translation yesterday, or people just say in their own words, that's not mutawatir lafzi. So some people say mutawatir lafzi doesn't exist, right? It doesn't really exist. Some scholars have the opinion of that. But there's a famous hadith which is always quoted. It's in Bukhari as well, and other and Muslim, and in other Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Majah, Ibn Majah, Darimi, and Sunan Musnad Imam Ahmad. That this famous hadith, and it's quite a play on words in the fact that this hadith actually relates to this discussion, which is man kadhaba alayya. It says this is wrong, printed wrong. It says mu'tamidan. What does it mean? Muta'ammidan it should be. Mu'tamidan. Muta'ammid is khata in this script. So here's it's a scriptural error. So man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawwa maq'adahu minan nar. That whoever creates a lie upon me about the Prophet ﷺ intentionally, then let him take his seat in the fire. So this is one hadith that has been narrated by 70 something sahaba, bid'un wa sab'una sahabiyan, and then this large quantity carried on through the generations. So they narrated to a large quantity this particular hadith. The second type of mutawatir, which is the final type of mutawatir, it's mutawatir in terms of its meaning and not in terms of its wording. So these hadith, for example, what this hadith is, for example, many sahaba in many different times saw the Prophet ﷺ raise his hands during dua. So when he did dua, he raised his hands. So a lot of the Sahaba saw him do it at different times. So Hamza will narrate this, the brother will narrate this, Muhammad will narrate this, right? Like I saw the Prophet ﷺ raise his hands. كان رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم رفع يديه في الدعاء. The Prophet ﷺ raised his hands in dua. Right? I would see him raise his hands in dua. The second day, you saw the Prophet ﷺ raise his hand in dua, so you narrated it to your students, and he narrated to his students. So many people narrated this incident of dua, but it was at different times. Do you understand? So it can be at different times, but together they gave strength to each other, and because so many people narrated it, again, someone who's not met the other person, they narrated it, right? So this basically comes to the level of mutawatir as well, but this is a second level of mutawatir, which is mutawatir ma'nawi, right? So the rafa yadayn in dua, in 100 hadith has been mentioned. The scholar mentions كل حديث منها فيه أنه رفع يديه في الدعاء, but لكنها في قضايا مختلفة. They were in different situations that they mentioned. فكل قضية منها لم تتواتر. So every single situation didn't reach tawatur, but together they reached the level of tawatur. والقدر المشترك بينهما وهو الرفع عند الدعاء تواتر باعتبار مجموع الطرق. Again, the existence of tawatur. Okay, some people say that there's many hadith mutawatir, not in terms of love, but in terms of meanings. Like for example, the hadith of the hawd. You know the hadith of the hawd? Does anyone know the hadith of the hawd of the Prophet ﷺ, the basin that the believers will drink from in the Day of Judgment? The Prophet ﷺ mentions that there will be a hawd, right? Whoever from his ummah will be able to drink from that, and then they will get intercession from the Prophet ﷺ. This is a hadith mutawatir ma'nawi. Again, the hadith of mas'al al-khuffayn. This is an interesting one. The hadith of mas'al al-khuffayn, when you have the sock that you have and wipe your sock on top of that. They say that's a mutawatir hadith, but it's not mentioned in the Quran. So now you have, in the Quran it says you wash your feet, but in this hadith it says, in these multiple hadiths it says the Sahaba did wipe upon their sock, and this is what the Prophet ﷺ taught. So again, it's not all the time that you wipe on your feet. It's certain times that you wipe on your feet. This is something that, again, like the brother mentioned, you act upon both of them, right? So when you're in journey, or when you're at home, 1 day and 1 night, you can wipe your sock. And when you're on a journey, you wipe your sock 3 days and 3 nights. Brother, you said that you act upon both of them. So this hadith mutawatir, it says something different to the Quran. In the Quran, it says when you do wudu, you wash your feet. In this hadith mutawatir, it says when you do wudu, you wipe on the sock. So you wipe on the sock. Also, hadith mutawatir is a tangent, but it's a tangential point about aqidah. So hadith mutawatir are also used of aqidah, and even in aqidah tahawiyah, Muhammad, it's mentioned in one of the points, masal al-khuffain. It's mentioned in aqidah tahawiyah, a point of belief. Well, people are confused. Why would you mention a fiqh ruling in aqidah text? Because aqidah is about your belief. So why would you mention the wiping of the sock? Right? I'll just leave you a cliffhanger for next week, inshallah.
There's no normal socks.
Okay, normal socks and the other side. This is a fiqh ruling that I'm not going to discuss because we're talking about hadith. It's going to take an hour to discuss this. Although we're never going to do this one. All right? There's conditions to that sock, but even then, there's disagreement. Some scholars allow different types of socks that you wipe on. But generally, I'm just saying this hadith. Why did they make it a point of creed? Why did they make it a point of aqidah that you wipe on your socks? Right? This is a cliffhanger. I'm gonna leave you at until next week.
You do the wudu and then you put your socks on.
Yeah.
Right. And then you want to do again the wudu. You don't have to take your socks on because you already.
Yeah, but that's not mentioned in the Quran though.
Yeah, you didn't. But
yeah, exactly. So you act upon both of them. But why is it a point of belief? Because in belief, it's never mentioned. Fiqh things are never mentioned, and it's also mentioned how you identify the Ahlul Sunnah. 10 signs. One of them is that they وَيَرَى الْمَسْعَ عَلَى الْخُفَّيْنِ. They say تَوْقِيرُ الشَّيْخَيْنِ. They give izzah to the two Sheikhs, Abu Bakr and Umar. They give izzah to Uthman and Ali, and then it's mentioned a few points. Right? Who are the Ahlul Sunnah? And one of the points is that they وَأَنْتَرَى مَسْعَ الْخُفَّيْنِ. That they understand Mas'al al-Khuffayn to be a legitimate practice. But why a point of aqidah? That's cliffhanger, so you come back. So, okay, that's that. Hadith Masal al-Khuffayn, Hadith Rafa Yadayn fi Salah. Then the Hadith, Nadar Allahu Imran, Allah illuminated the face of he who narrates Hadith, propagates it as he heard it. This Hadith we mentioned in the beginning. لكن لو نظرنا إلى عدد أحاديث الآحاد. So then the opposite of Mutawatir, and I'm going to finish on this. Yeah, I'm going to finish on this one. Is the hadith of ahad, solitary narrations. Some scholars said anything that isn't mutawatir is ahad, is solitary narrations. But a solitary narration can be sahih also, can be authentic in terms of its transmission. There are many hadith, brothers might disagree with me, the hadith of khilafah, some of the Hanafi scholars say that's ahad. Right? This is a side topic which causes many discussions, but they say a point that I forgot to mention, but now I mentioned to the brother now, mutawatir and ahad. Some scholars say that the hadith of khilaf are all ahad. The hadith about, for example, naqisatul aql, so about women being deficient in the mental capacity, ahad again, right? Hadith about so on certain things, you might find them in Sahih al-Bukhari, right? Again, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk about Sahih al-Bukhari and how we act upon it. Do we have to act upon hadith of Bukhari hands down, or how do we understand things in Bukhari which actually don't make sense in terms of our amal? And even for Hanafis, it's a big thing as well. When Bukhari said, وَقَالَ بَعْضُ النَّاسِ, who is he talking about? Bukhari said 158 times, وَقَالَ بَعْضُ النَّاسِ, some people say, and he said, the hadith is like this, but they say this. He's actually talking about the Hanafi school. So how can some people turn around and he's like, oh yeah, anything Bukhari, you have to completely act upon it, etc. This is what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks' time. We have to understand it in a sober sort of manner. So Hadith Mutawatir, but in comparison to Hadith Ahad, there are many Hadith Ahad compared to Hadith Mutawatir, but that doesn't thingy kind of what Hadith Mutawatir is. Asharul Musannafat fihi, the most famous writings on a hadith ahad. So you have, for example, a book that Allama Suyuti wrote, Azharul Mutanathira fil Akhbar al-Mutawatira, and it's narrated as Suyuti collected all the hadith mutawatir. I think he collected about 200, but even then, some people in those 200 hadith, some people even said some of those hadith are weak. So how can they be mutawatir and weak? How do we understand that? As-Suyuti, he compiled 200 hadith mutawatira, but some scholars, after analyzing it, says some of the chains are weak. Shaykh Muhammad, how do we understand that? They understand it because they say he took a different definition of mutawatir. Because mutawatir is very difficult to achieve, right? If you look in hindsight, it's very difficult to achieve. So it's likely that they took a slightly different definition to mutawatir. They might have understood mutawatir as, in the first generation, 10 people narrate it, and then they might have the solitary change. You'll see in the diagram, it makes more sense. Okay, and the second book is An-Nazm al-Mutanathir min al-Hadith al-Mutawatir by Muhammad bin Ja'far al-Kattani, a Moroccan scholar who compiled the Hadith Mutawatir. And then the scholar, the final discussion he mentions is regarding Khabar al-Ahad, the definition, its ruling, and that's the end of it. So he said Khabar Ahad, Ahad literally means one. Ahad in Arabic, what does it mean? One, right? What's the difference between Wahid and Ahad?
Ahad is a promise, isn't it?
Negation.
No, that's Ahad with Ain.
Ah.
This is a difficult question. You have to study. This is a question for this brother here who's had years of studying Arabic. He knows the answer. What's Wahid and Ahad?
Like Allahu Ahad.
Why didn't he say Qul huwa Allahu Wahid? It's nothing to do with fiqh or hadith or anything. It's just a linguistic point.
Is it infinite or something?
Wahid, it still means one, but why use Wahid?
Negate something that.
Oh, mashallah, this brother been studying Arabic poetry, huh? Mashallah. So ahad literally is a negation kind of thing. So when you're saying except one, you say ahad. But when you're affirming, you say wahid, right? Qul huwa Allahul wahidul qahar. Allah says in another verse of the Quran. Allah is wahid, the most dominant. But when Qul huwa Allah and in Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Say He is Allah, the one. Allah is saying that there is actually no other one, because at this point He's denying all the other gods except for Allah. So He's used it for a negation. This is a side point for Arabic grammar, and it's a rhetoric is quite difficult, but it's just a side point. Why ahad versus wahid? So ahad, even if we understand it in this hadithi way, ahad literally is everything except. So mutawatir is everything except for ahad. And then the Hanafi scholars come up with the third category called mashhur. But then some scholars say mashhur and mustafid, they're the same thing. It's part of ahad. Abu Bakr Jassas al-Razi, who's a early Hanafi scholar, he says that there are three categories of hadith: mutawatir, mashhur, and ahad. But some scholars say ahad is a part of mashhur, and this scholars included ahad as a part of mashhur. It's a subcategory of mashhur. So ahad is basically the plural of ahad. وخبر الواحد هو ما يرويه شخص واحد. So one companion narrated it from the Prophet ﷺ, and then they narrated it to one companion, and they narrated one companion. Later on, it might have become famous. When it came in Sahih Bukhari, it became famous. A lot of people picked up Bukhari, read it to the students. He mentioned that when Al-Farabi, the transmitter of Sahih Bukhari, at one point it was narrated to 90,000 students, right? So if 90,000 people heard it, that's definitely mutawatir. But then it became mutawatir later on. So some people say later on everything sort of becomes mutawatir because everyone knows about it. So that's why it's really important. What we're talking about is the first 3-4 generations kind of thing, until it reached a point where it was codified in the books. So one scholar narrated it. In the technically, the meaning of ahad is that which didn't reach the conditions of mutawatir, right? What's the ruling on khabar ahad? The ruling of khabar ahad is the different ruling to khabar mutawatir. Khabar mutawatir, what was the ruling? If something's mutawatir, what do we do?
At least 10.
Yeah, but what's the ruling regarding it? In terms of applicability, do we have to act upon it or not? Yeah, we have to act upon it because it's 100% with a shadow of a doubt that the Prophet ﷺ said it. That's why the definitions of mutawatir are very high. They even scholars in fiqh, they mention if you object in aqidah also, because all the aqidah are taken from the mutawatir hadith. That's why they say if you object to a point of mutawatir, then that takes you out of the fold of Islam. That's why they say it's a very high threshold to reach. But some scholars who have a low threshold, like for example, the coming of Isa alayhi salam, that's a point of aqidah. So is that mutawatir hadith? According to some scholars who have the threshold of mutawatir a bit lower, that follows mutawatir. According to the scholar, that is mutawatir. Right? That's why it's a point of faith. Dajjal, again, is argued, is it ahad or mutawatir in the scholarly community? Right? Is this ahad, is this mutawatir? Because some scholars think that, okay, it might make sense that I say to you something and then after that you narrate to 10 people, right? And then I tell him in another isolated incident, but then he tells 10 people. But it's the same thing. So some people took all these ahad together and they took as mutawatir. But can you compare this to 10 people hearing the exact same thing? 10 people hearing the exact same thing is quite a different scenario, right? There is not a shadow of a doubt here. Here, he might have slightly heard it wrong. We never know. But really 10 people can't really hear it wrong. Unless, obviously, there's a very low probability, 0.01% chance. But generally, a mutawatir, the high threshold, the one that you can say that if you object to it, you're out of the fold of Islam. For example, like the Quran, right? That has a high threshold and it's very difficult to attain and reach, right? So this sort of mutawatir, right? It's wajib to act upon if there's 100% doubt, and anything other than that, it's يفيد العلم النظري أي علم المتوقف على النظر والاستدلال. So you have to sort of look inside it, you have to use a scriptural lens, and then you sort of weigh up the Quran and Hadith, weigh up this Hadith. Okay, you know the first Hadith, you don't even need to weigh it up with other narrations, you just act upon it because you know it's mutawatir, not a shadow of a doubt. This Hadith you have to weigh up, you have to look at it in light of the other Hadith, and then you understand how you apply this Hadith. Is this Hadith something that the Prophet ﷺ said before he was in Makkah, or is it when he was in Medina? Is this Hadith something that the ruling changed about? For example, alcohol in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la taqrabu as-salata wa antum sukara. Or you who believe, don't go near prayer when you are intoxicated, right? So does that mean you're allowed to be intoxicated when you're not in prayer? Right? So in other verses, this tafsir of this verse saying, no, إنما الخمر والميسر رجس من عمل الشيطان. That the khamr and maisir, that alcohol and gambling are a form of disgusting behavior from the acts of Satan. Right? So some people, so this is why you have to understand them in light of one in light of the other, and you have to understand which came later, which came earlier. You have to understand, was it like in Abu Huraira situation? Was that ruling specific for that particular man, or was it a general ruling for everyone? Right? Abu Huraira understood, now that was specific for that man, that was specific for that man. But he thought, if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have known that. I would have just narrated what I saw, literally. This is why ahad, solitary incidents, you need to have a holistic approach when understanding them. And the final point, كل تقسيم باعتبار وسأذكر هذين التقسيمين في الفصل الثاني. I think that's enough for ahad, and later on there's more discussions regarding ahad. I told you it's going to be difficult, but inshallah the visual representations will